wrap-up of 2015 with Maryland Agriculture. You know, when I came on as secretary in January, and it was before I even came on as secretary, one of the things that I heard through the ag community is there was a lot of uncertainty about, I'll call it, our future as far as farming here in the state and all. And one of the first, I guess we call it, obstacles or goals that we had to try to accomplish was to try to restore some faith that you know, we actually do have a future here with farming and agriculture in Maryland, and know that farming is not only in the future for us who are doing it now, but for our kids and grandkids. So that was one of the first goals, and we tried to make sure that we diversify and expand the farm operations more through the state and keep them going, whether it's ag value added products on the farm or other more diversified products that can be produced on the farm. And when I say that, one of the things I'm talking about is with organic production in the state, which seems to be on a big upswing. There's a lot more demand right now than there is supply, especially in areas where we really don't think about it as far as grain and things like that, because there's been a big expansion for organic poultry and things like that. You really can't keep the supply going for the organic grains that are needed to keep the chickens fed. Cleaning up the bay. Everybody wondered, what are we going to do about the phosphorus problem and the PMT that was kind of looming over our heads. I'm talking about the administration, the legislature, the farm community, the university community. Nobody really knew. There were regs that were on the table. The governor pulled those regs, reviewed them. We worked with, and I call it all the industry groups. When I say all the industry groups, I'm talking about the ag groups, the university groups, the environmental groups, and the hardest group of all, the legislative group. I say that because one of it was the second or third day that I was on the job, I attended that phosphorus symposium. I call it the moratorium. The moratorium is on fields of 500 FIV or more, so I was getting to that. But the phosphorus symposium at Chesapeake College. And I said it right after that. I said I felt like that day, it was kind of like my head was dipped and I was baptized in phosphorus, because I got to know more about phosphorus than I ever thought I ever really needed to know. And when I came away that day knowing a lot more about it, so did a lot of other members of the agriculture community. And one of the, if there was anything anybody took away from that, is that we don't know everything about phosphorus that we need to know at this point. The one thing we need to know is we need to start acting on it, we need to do something, but at the same time, the facts and the science that continues to come before us is constantly changing. So there was legislation before the General Assembly, and then you had regs that had just been pulled. So there was kind of like a struggle, and you know, I was kind of like right in the middle of it at the time. Assistant Secretary Royden Powell kind of went with me to all the meetings, and it was more or less a plea to the legislators: don't pass legislation. Give us the time to be able to put these things into regulation. And you know, you say, why? You know, why is regulation more important than statute? Well, it's because when it goes into statute, like I said, you have constantly changing facts, constantly changing science. If you need to make a change to it, you've got to go back to the legislature, and they've got to act on it to make the change to that statute. So then you have to deal with what I call the political climate. And when you're dealing an issue like that, you don't want to deal with the political climate, you want to deal with the facts and science that's on the table. So we were able to work that all out, and we got what I felt was the best proposal as far as regulations that had come forth to date. It may have taken a lot of practice before that, but it was really the best proposal that came forward yet, to be able to have an end goal in sight. And I say an end goal in sight, we were allowed to move forward with the PMT, and we were able to identify then with soil test results fields across the state what the phosphorus levels are in them, where we had to concentrate our manure transport program, and where fields are that really can't handle any more phosphorus at this time. So that goal was accomplished, so it allows us to move forward, make changes as we need it, and hopefully everybody is satisfied and recognizes that accomplishment. Right after that, and one of the things that I can see is we're doing all this here in Maryland. The Chesapeake Bay is identified as Maryland's, even though Virginia's right there, and they share part of it too. Really, the Chesapeake Bay is more identified as Maryland than any other state. We're surrounded by a number of states, and one of the things that I really felt was necessary was we need to get regional cooperation from all of our states in an effort to clean up the Chesapeake Bay. So it was on April 22nd, which happened to be Earth Day in Annapolis here at the Maryland Department of Agriculture. We had a summit with the surrounding states' secretaries of agriculture, where we discussed what we've done, what they're doing, and hopefully where they need to go to help to make sure that what we do here, we're not making one step forward while in other ways we're making a step and a half backward, at the same time, so that when we look at results here in the Chesapeake Bay, it's because of a regional effort, and it's not because we're going at 100% and some other folks are going at 60 or even 20%, so that we have a cooperative effort. Because one of the things everybody has to recognize is the marketplace that we're in. Mark Powell, our marketing director, will tell you this. Our marketplace is not Baltimore or the Eastern Shore or just the state of Maryland or even the Mid-Atlantic area. Our marketplace is a big regional marketplace which not only goes across the United States but now across the globe. So that's where we have to look at our products going, and we have to be able to compete and stay in that marketplace with our neighbors. So, otherwise we're going to have big problems with our number one industry here in the state, which is agriculture, and I emphasize that too wherever I go. I talked about our cleanup efforts, our PMT, restoring regional trust. When I was introduced, one of the things that was mentioned was Secretary Lou Rowley, who I served with in the legislature, and I consider a great secretary. And what was mentioned was that cooperation and connection with the University of Maryland, which I call our educational component out there across the state. And this is me saying this personally, this isn't coming from the department or anything, but I really feel like for whatever reasons, and I don't know how that happened, but to me, there hasn't been a good enough connection between us and MDA and our educational partners at the University of Maryland in recent years. And when I talk about restoring the faith, that's part of restoring that faith. Because when we work together to make these improvements that we need to make here in this state, our partner in doing that is our education community at the University of Maryland. You're our team, and you know that's where it's going to happen. I mean, we're going to rely on you, and so you may feel in the end like I'm placing more of a burden on you, because as the sessions come up and we're dealing more with you know, our partners in the legislature, you'll find that I'll be calling on you more often than you may care to want. So, anyway, I think that's really important, and I think our farmers out there are really going to be appreciative of that kind of effort. Our buyer-grower conference, I mentioned Mark Powell here. That was one of the other things that, one of the first things that happened in February? January? January of last year, and it's coming up again after the first of the year, Buyer-Growers Conference at the Navy Marine Corps Stadium, and it connected producers and growers from all over the state with regional buyers, and you know, that was the first time that I really experienced what MDA marketing was doing, and during the course of the past year, I found out a lot more about those efforts from experiencing it firsthand as being a part of it. And when I say firsthand as being a part of it, I'll let you in on something that's not too much of a secret anymore, because some of you have probably already heard about you know, those experiences with me. But before I was secretary, the last time I flew in an airplane was 38 years ago. Now, to me, when you take a flight, it's any time that plane goes up and comes back down. That's one flight for me. It's like, you know, you put the slash there. So, I might have only had like 3 different destinations where I went to this year, going there and coming back here. But every time that plane went up and came down, that was another notch I put down. So this year, I've had 9 flights where I've gone up and down. I've been, every time the plane gets back to BWI, it's time to celebrate. You know, that's the best part of the trip. The worst part of the trip is when you go to Cuba and your stopover is in Miami, and you stay in Miami overnight, you stay in the same room with Mark Powell. Because, I'll tell you why. The World Series might be on, and the World Series may go into extra innings, but I didn't stay up for it. He did, and I fell asleep. But it was long about 2 o'clock in the morning, I noticed that the shades were vibrating. And when I seen his daughter at the market after that, she 9 or 11? 11. Yeah, I told her that I felt sorry for her when she had to go camping with him and stay in the same tent. Anyway, the trip to Cuba was really interesting. It was you know, part of like our ag trade show mission there, and they had a trade show there. I think it's a whole lot of potential there for us to expand that as a marketplace in the future. There were some companies from here that went. One of the most important things, and Chief of Staff Kevin Conroy is standing there in the back. He's got the blue shirt and dark blue blazer on. See him right there? I emphasized to him that one of the things that we have to stress to the governor and all is, with what other states are doing, nobody's sitting on their hands watching what's going on down there. All the states are aggressive to make sure that they're in the front of the line to take on that marketplace. And we can't sit and watch idly and let that time go by. When I heard Virginia's presentation, and they went first, that because it was in 2 days down there, I made like, what, 7 presentations of different groups down there. At the first presentation, I thought that in the United States, I thought that there was one state, and that was Virginia. After I heard their presentation. So I knew after that, you know, how aggressive we needed to be on that front, and we changed the whole approach. But anyway, one of the other things I've seen there, we were walking through the Ag Trade Show, and some of you might know what this is, and some may not, but an old Alice Chalmers G. Old Alice Chalmers was probably manufactured from maybe early 40s or something, the early 50s. Had a motor behind the seat. Some of them didn't have hydraulics, only had hand controls. Walking through the trade show there, and I said to Mark, I said, "There's an Alice Chalmers G." I said, "I know what it is because I got one." And we walked over. It was brand new, remanufactured. It's a company out of Alabama. It's manufacturing because the patent ran out, and they're there to sell it in Cuba. Hopefully, they open up a manufacturing plant there because he said it would be the state-of-the-art tractor for Cuba. So it has a single bottom plow and hydraulics. And I was like, wow. So that gives you an idea. And well, the other thing too is I came back with the strong, not belief, but understanding now that when anybody comes up to me and complains about Maryland, what problems we have here, or the United States, what problems we have in this country, I mean, I just feel like telling them, shut up. Go to Cuba, find out how other folks live, the problems that they face, then come back and you can appreciate a lot more what we have here and the opportunity we have here. We had, I talked about our partners in the legislature, and I'll close with this because I gave this kind of wrap up down at the Farm Bureau Convention. I had a half an hour there, it took 55 minutes. They told me, they said, you got the same remarks to make, but cut it brief because you got 15 minutes and they want to eat lunch. We talked about our partners in the legislature. One of the things that I seen when we were tackling that PMT and all, and some of the other bills there, is when I served here in the House, there were probably about 15 farmers in the House and the Senate and the legislature that a lot of the other members relied on their knowledge of the ag community for things that they were dealing with. There is one now, Senator Mac Middleton, and that's it. So one of the things I thought was we had to try to do, and you know, I'm not stopping with the effort that we made this year, is invite the legislators and get them out to see what I call regular working Maryland farms, to see what problems they face, what obstacles they face, what the effects are, good or bad, from regulations, what effects there are from legislation, good or bad, and what we can do in the future to work with them to make sure that they stay viable in our economic climate. So we started them this year. We had 4 different areas of tours with legislators besides our Ag Commission tours. They were pretty successful for a first time, and we're going to keep it up. We're going to keep it up. When we had the state fair this year, I had a legislative breakfast, which was kind of different up there. Invited the legislators in, and plus the local elected officials, and talked to them that morning and explained the history and the importance of agriculture at the state fair and all that. So it's education. It's not just education coming from the university community, but education from us to try to educate the legislative community on what it all is. So I'll end with that and keep it coming. That was it. Yep, that was it. 12:09. Time to stop. End the remarks. Jason, did you get all that?
I did.
Okay. Vanessa, you got it?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's it. If anybody has any questions, Mark's here to answer them. No. Steve's here. Well, actually, see, I've been referencing Mark, but Steve Conley, Assistant Secretary, is actually Mark's boss, you know, who's here. And
Finally.
have you talked to him? Well, I mean, there's a reason for that. So, anyway, it was great to be here. Paul, where's Paul?
Right here.
Yeah, you're all doing a great job with the Ag Law Clinic. We appreciate that cooperation we have now, you know, with the ag community too. And I just wanted to single that out. So, kudos. Thanks.